Hi everyone. One of the things that people are very familiar with about the SQL is how we use it to query an existing database and retrieve a data set for analysis, right? But just beyond querying an existing database, few people have the understanding that we can also use the SQL to create a new database, right? And then it's one of what we're going to be looking at in few minutes to see how exactly we create a database. As we may have known before now, right? There are five major statements in SQL, and these are the data definition language, we call them DDL, right? The data query language, we call it DQL, which is what people use the most, right? We have the data manipulation language, people also are familiar with this. We have the data control language, right? And we also have the transactional control language, right? To create a database belongs to the statement data definition language, and we're going to be using the create statement to perform this operation. I'm going to show you how to create uh, tables. I mean, how to use the create database, right? As we might have understood before now, there can't be a table without a database, right? So if you will create a table, a new table, the table would have to be in a particular database. So there is a need to first of all create that database, right? And the database can then have several tables, that you have created inside of it. And of course, the table itself will now have the number of, several columns that's you have arranged your information into, right? So it's important to first create a database, right? Let's ensure that a database exists. Then two, we would create tables in that database, right? Then in the table also we will create the columns of the table. So let's quickly be on our screen and see how this can be done. We use the create statement. So let's take for instance, I want to create a table called the employee details table, right? Or let's just call it employee table, right? And then the employee table will have several columns that contains the information of a number of employee for the organization. So let's say it's going to have the staff number, first name, last name, department, employee date, salary, and gender, right? So how do we create this table into our database? This is different to when we say that the database already exists. We just want to query it and call out those information, right? But then, like, as I've stated earlier, you cannot create a table without first creating the database. So to create, let's call the database because it's going to be a database for a data for an organization. So let's say the name of the company is AYZ, right? AYZ. So we're going to call the database AYZ Limited, right? So we'll just call it. To create table, we would use the create statement, and it's written in this way. Say create. What are you creating? A database. So we're going to say create database, right? And the name we want to call that database, we have said we should call it AYZ. Let's just put it this out of the space, limited, right? And then at the end of every statement in SQL should end with, every statement in SQL should end with a semicolon to show that you are done writing that statement. And we say you will execute with this button right here. You can see we execute the statement here. So I say execute, right? Now the database has been created. How do you know that the database has been created? You're going to look at this left hand side of your screen, right? And the left hand side is divided into two. You have the administration and the schema. Schema is another name for database. So ensure that you are on schema, not on database. You should be on schema. Now on schema, the new database that you have created should show on the list of all the databases that I have here, that you have there, right? On my home screen, I have Awesome Chocolate, that's the database. I have Sakila, I have Subview Analytics, that's another database. I also have Word. These are the databases that I have, right? I have created AYZ Limited. I'm expected, it is expected that it is also included among this database, but yet I'm not saying it even though I've created it. To make it show, I'll just come to this button. This is the refresh button. So click this refresh button and it will show up. Now you can see it here, right? This is the AYZ Limited database. So the new database that I've created is now showing among every other databases that are that I have on my instance, right? But then at the moment, the database is not functional, because for it to functional, I need to activate the database. A database that is activated is what you will see with a bold, font, very thick black font, right? So as it is on my system, it is the database soft view analytics that is active, right? I am not interested in working with this. I want to work with the AYZ limited database. So what would I do? All I have to do is just to double click on it, and then and it will be activated. I'm doing that right away, right? And you can see now that this database is activated. It is now that I can go ahead to create my table into this database. And of course, now that I have the database active, I can now come to write statements that will help me to create table, right? We are still using the create statement. I'm going to say create. What am I creating this time? It is no more a database. I am not creating a table, right? So I'm going to say create table, right? Then I'll give the table a name. I've said let's call it employee table, right? So I'm going to call it employee, right? And then creating the table means that I am going it will have columns, right? So I will begin to impute the columns, the names of the columns of that table into it, right? The columns of the table, right? And this is how it works. After saying create table employee, right? Create table, and the name of the table would be employee. Then the column that I want to have in there, let's say I want to have staff, what do you call it? I want to have staff number, right? Ensure that you recall that you can't put in space bar when you're writing the statement. So instead that you use underscore to separate as a delimiter, right? Or you just write it together. That's what I'm doing. I'm writing it together, right? I've written the first column. I want to have a column for staff number. But then as it is, when you are creating a table, it is not just to write the column name, right? You will go ahead to specify the data type of that column that you are creating, right? My staff number is going to be numbers, all true numbers, right? And it can be a decimal number, it can be a float, it can be a fraction. It's going to be most likely going to be an integer. So after writing the name of the column, which is staff number, I'll go ahead to specify the data type that it should be. Of course, it is an integer, and that's why I've written integer. If this is not done, you will find it will be difficult for you to begin to impute data into the table you have created, right? I've done that for the first column. I'm going to write for the second column, which will be first name, right? First name, yes. And the first name, what data type should it be? I'm going to use varchar. I want to put that in capital letter, come on. Varchar. Then beyond saying varchar, for this data type, after specifying the data type that you want to use, which are called varchar, you still go ahead to tell SQL that I want the size of the character that this data type should take, should be this or that. So the size of the data type of the character or variable character should be 50. So I'm going to say 50, right, and close the brackets. This will be kept in a bracket. Then I will go ahead to write the next column, which I want to be the last name, right? Last name. The data type will be varchar, and it's still 50, right? I will go ahead to write the next column, which I'm going to make department. I'm going to call department. What is the data type for department? What is the type that I want to make this, right? I'm going to make it, let's call it car this time around. We have used varchar for a while, so let's just say car, right? And what's the size of it? Let me have 20 in it, right? And then the next column would be the employee, right? Employment date, right? Employment date. For this, the data type will be is a date, right? We're just going to have date to be the data type, same way it is. Recall that I said that you write the column name and the data type will follow. That is the standard for creating a table in SQL, right? And my next column would be salary and numbers. So I'm going to use integer, right? But then it's going to be big number because people can be earning in hundreds of thousands, right? So I'm going to use big integer. So I'm going to call it big integer, right? And then lastly, I'm going to write the last column. I'll call it gender, right? My gender will be a car, and the size of it will be just 1. I'm using 1 because I want to denote the gender with just the acronyms, right? M for male and F for female, right? These are the columns that I'm going to have in my table, right? And I'm going to say, okay, once I'm done with it, I'm going to put in my semicolon to say that, okay, I am done writing the statement. But then one of the things that you will notice is that there is a cross sign here, which means that there is an error somewhere. So I'll go back to check what the error possibly is, right? So I'm going to check from the beginning. Create database. Create database. I've called it employee. So I move on, right? So we're just going to check where the error is possibly, has existed. But then one of the things I want to do is to ensure that my database, the query, the statement I'm writing is well arranged. So I can come here to put a good arrangement to them. I want them to be on the next page, right? Staff number. I've defined the staff number. I've defined the first name. I'm defining the last name. Let it be like that, right? This is still the same thing as if you have written it on a straight line, but then because I want to have oversight on it, I always advise that you break it into different lines like this, right? If you have it on a straight line, it's going to extend beyond the screen size, and then you have to keep scrolling before you see it, right? Now we have looked at, I've broken it, and we're still trying to check out what the error is. I still have this crossover here, right? Create table name. All right, so I found that's how this is obvious now, right? So we have started with a bracket here, so we need to close the second bracket over here, right? Now you can see that the statement has been approved. We have this is a sign to know that the statement has been approved. You have this blue dot, right, without the cross. Now with this, I can go ahead to execute, and execution means that my statement has been executed. So let me see what I've written. Let's see the table. So to see the table, you can then say select all from, what's the table name now, from employee, and then execute this statement. If I execute this statement, right, I'm going to see, you can see now my table had been created. I have testing with then begin to populate.